My name is Opal, and I'm 58 years old. Never did I imagine that on a single Tuesday in April, my son would tell me to move out of my own home, while my husband of 35 years handed me divorce papers. The twin betrayals left me breathless, as if the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. What those men never suspected was that I'd been quietly planning for this possibility. Where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments and hit that subscribe button. No one can truly understand the feeling of such a double betrayal until it happens to you. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs in my marriage to Richard long before everything fell apart. We met in law school, though. Only one of us would go on to practice. I abandoned my legal aspirations when Richard's career at Harrington and Walsh took off, focusing instead on raising our two children and maintaining our home in Highland Park, an affluent Chicago suburb. Our 5-bedroom colonial, with its sprawling yard, became the envy of Richard's colleagues during summer barbecues. The pristine kitchen with marble countertops, where I prepared countless family meals, the formal dining room where we hosted Thanksgiving for both families each year, the sunroom where I tended to my orchids while watching the children play in the yard. Every corner of that house held 35 years of memories. "Your home is always so perfect, Opal," Richard's colleagues' wives would comment. What they didn't see was how that perfection came at the cost of my own aspirations. I had been working toward my master's in education when Marcus was born. 2 courses shy of completion, I put it on indefinite hold when Richard received his first major promotion. "It's just temporary, honey," Richard had assured me. "Once I'm established, you can go back and finish." But the right time never seemed to arrive. Instead, our lives fell into a comfortable pattern. Richard built his reputation as one of Chicago's most successful corporate attorneys, while I managed our home and raised Marcus and Alicia. Marcus was always his father's son. From an early age, he admired Richard's ambition and success. When he announced his intention to follow his father into law, Richard beamed with pride. Marcus had always been academically gifted, serious, and somewhat emotionally distant, much like his father. Our relationship was cordial, but lacked the warmth and openness I shared with Alicia. My daughter was artistic, empathetic, and fiercely independent. She rejected the path her father and brother chose, pursuing art history and museum curation in San Francisco. Though we spoke weekly by phone, her absence left a hole in my daily life, especially as Richard's work hours grew longer and Marcus moved away for college and then law school. The first real fracture in our family dynamic appeared at Marcus's wedding to Natalie 3 years ago. From the moment I met her, I sensed Natalie viewed me as competition rather than family. She came from what she proudly called a traditional family, where multiple generations lived together with clear, hierarchical structures. Her parents, Harold and Catherine, dominated every decision in their family, and it became clear they expected the same authority in their daughter's marriage. During wedding planning, Natalie deferred to her mother's opinions on everything from the venue to my outfit as mother of the groom. When I suggested incorporating a few family traditions from our side, Natalie smiled tightly and said, "We already have plenty of traditions from my family, Opal. We wouldn't want to overcomplicate things." That wedding weekend, I noticed Richard spending an unusual amount of time with his new executive assistant, Veronica. She was 32, with sleek dark hair and a law degree of her own. Richard introduced her as the firm's rising star, but something in their interactions made my stomach tighten. The way she touched his arm when she laughed, the inside jokes they shared, the late-night emergency work call that pulled Richard away from the rehearsal dinner for 45 minutes. In the months following the wedding, Richard's behavior shifted subtly. He began working later, traveling more frequently, and growing protective of his phone. The classic signs were all there, but after 35 years of marriage, I didn't want to see them. Meanwhile, Marcus and Natalie purchased a starter home across town, a modest 3-bedroom that Natalie constantly complained about. "It's just so small," she would lament during Sunday dinners at our house, "and the kitchen needs a complete renovation." When Marcus called one evening to ask if they could move in with us temporarily while they saved for a larger home, Richard agreed immediately without consulting me. "It makes financial sense," he argued when I expressed concerns about losing our privacy. "And it's not forever." I reluctantly agreed, never imagining that this decision would set in motion the events that would ultimately shatter my life as I knew it. As I prepared the guest room for them, I had no idea I was creating space for the people who would eventually try to push me out of my own home. The day Marcus and Natalie moved in marked the beginning of subtle but persistent changes to my home and daily routines. What started as minor inconveniences quickly evolved into a systematic effort to diminish my presence and authority in my own house. Within the first week, I returned from grocery shopping to find the living room completely rearranged. The sofa where I'd spent countless evenings reading now faced away from the window, and my reading lamp had been relocated to the basement. "We thought this layout works better for entertaining," Natalie explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "It really opens up the space, don't you think?" Before I could formulate a response, Richard walked in and immediately praised the change. "Looks fantastic. You have quite the eye for design, Natalie." That pattern repeated itself throughout the house. My carefully organized kitchen cabinets were reorganized according to Natalie's preferences. The family photos that had lined the hallway were replaced with artistic black and white prints that Natalie had brought from their previous home. "Those old frames were a bit dated," she commented when I asked about my missing photos. "Don't worry, I've stored them safely in boxes in the attic." Richard's support of these changes puzzled and hurt me. When I expressed my discomfort at finding my personal space altered without consultation, he dismissed my concerns. "They're just trying to help modernize the place a bit, Opal. You've always been resistant to change." This newfound alliance between Richard and our son's family created an increasingly uncomfortable dynamic. During disagreements, Richard consistently sided with Marcus and Natalie, often leaving me feeling outnumbered and unheard in discussions about my own home. One evening, I overheard Richard on the phone in his study, speaking in hushed tones long after he thought I'd gone to sleep. His study door was slightly ajar, and his words drifted clearly into the hallway. "Yes, tomorrow night works. No, she won't suspect anything. I know, patience isn't your strong suit. Just a little longer, I promise." My heart pounded as I silently returned to our bedroom. Who was he speaking to so intimately at midnight? The next day, Richard announced a last-minute business trip to New York, claiming a client emergency. Financial disagreements began to surface with increasing frequency. Richard questioned expenses that had never been issues before scrutinizing the household budget I'd managed efficiently for decades. "Do we really need to spend this much on groceries?" he asked, reviewing the monthly credit card statement. "And these gardening supplies seem excessive." Meanwhile, Natalie began suggesting improvements to various parts of the house, always with the unstated implication that my taste and preferences were outdated. "This space has so much potential," she said, gesturing around our family room. "With the right updates, it could be transformed completely." The word transformed hung in the air like a threat. I was beginning to feel like an unwelcome guest in my own home, tolerated rather than respected. During a phone call with Alicia, my daughter picked up on my distress, despite my attempts to sound cheerful. "Mom, what's really going on there?" she pressed. "You don't sound like yourself." After some hesitation, I shared my concerns about Richard's late-night calls and increasingly secretive behavior. "Dad's always been work-obsessed," Alicia said, "but this sounds different. Have you checked his emails or phone?" The suggestion shocked me. In 35 years of marriage, I had never invaded Richard's privacy in that way. But Alicia's concern planted a seed that would later grow into a crucial decision. The situation escalated when I accidentally discovered emails on our shared computer that Richard had forgotten to close. They contained discussions with a real estate agent about waterfront properties in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. There was no mention of these property searches to me, despite the significant financial investment they would represent. One email particularly caught my eye. Let's continue this conversation on my private email. Want to keep this under the radar for now. My suspicions grew stronger when I noticed Richard had created a new password-protected folder on our home computer labeled Personal Projects. When questioned, he became defensive. It's just work stuff, nothing you need to worry about, he snapped. Since when do you monitor my computer usage? The final concerning development came when Natalie announced that her parents needed to stay with us temporarily after a severe storm damaged their home. It's just until the insurance claim is processed, she assured me. 2 weeks maximum. But something about the way she avoided eye contact and how Marcus and Richard exchanged glances suggested there was more to this arrangement than I was being told. That evening, I stood in our bedroom, looking at the life Richard and I had built together, wondering how many of those seemingly solid foundations were actually built on quicksand. What Richard, Marcus, and Natalie didn't know was that I had been preparing for potential betrayal for nearly 2 years. My suspicions about Richard's fidelity began one ordinary Tuesday when he left his phone on the kitchen counter while showering. A text notification illuminated the screen. Miss you already. Last night was amazing. Can't wait until next week. The sender was saved simply as Veronica, his executive assistant. Instead of confronting him immediately, I decided to watch and wait, gathering information while protecting myself. The pain of that discovery was excruciating, but it sparked a determination I hadn't felt in decades. If Richard was planning an exit, I would ensure I wasn't left vulnerable. First, I began documenting everything. I photographed bank statements, investment accounts, property deeds, and tax returns. I created spreadsheets tracking our assets and liabilities, noting discrepancies between reported income and our actual lifestyle. Richard had always handled our finances, providing me with a monthly allowance for household expenses while managing investments himself. When I casually mentioned interest in learning more about our financial planning, he patronizingly suggested I focus on what I do best, running the household. That dismissal only strengthened my resolve. I began setting aside small amounts from the grocery budget, building a cash reserve hidden in a new bank account opened under my maiden name. I sold jewelry I rarely wore and deposited the proceeds into this emergency fund. 6 months after discovering the text, I scheduled a discreet consultation with Jennifer Harlow, a divorce attorney known for representing women in high-asset cases. We met at a coffee shop 20 miles from my neighborhood to avoid being seen by any of Richard's colleagues or friends. Based on what you've described, Opal Richard may be hiding assets, Jennifer explained. The separate accounts, unexplained cash withdrawals, and new business entities formed in Delaware all suggest financial concealment. What should I do? I asked, feeling simultaneously terrified and empowered. Document everything without alerting him. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, meaning marital assets should be divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. Your contributions as a homemaker and mother have value under the law. Jennifer advised me to continue gathering evidence while preparing financially and emotionally for potential separation. The spouse who plans usually fares better than the one who's surprised, she noted. I reconnected with my college friend Sandra, who had navigated a difficult divorce 5 years earlier. Over lunch dates that Richard believed were book club meetings, Sandra provided both emotional support and practical advice. The day Thomas served me papers, I couldn't access our joint accounts, she warned. Have emergency cash and copies of all important documents somewhere safe outside your home. Following her advice, I rented a small safe deposit box at a bank where Richard did not have accounts. There, I stored copies of our marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies, and my personal identification documents. I also began rebuilding professional skills that had atrophied during my years as a homemaker. Using my personal laptop, I enrolled in online education courses, updating my knowledge of current teaching methodologies and curriculum development. I researched certification requirements for returning to education after my long absence. Meanwhile, Richard's suspicious behavior increased. I discovered brochures for luxury condominiums hidden in his briefcase. Bank statements showed large withdrawals just below the $50,000 threshold that would trigger additional documentation requirements. Most concerning was the formation of a new LLC in Wyoming that appeared on a misdirected piece of mail. When I searched the business online, I found Richard listed as the managing member with Veronica as the registered agent. The pieces were falling into place. Richard wasn't just having an affair. He was systematically separating assets and preparing for a dramatic life change. A chance comment from Natalie provided unexpected confirmation of my suspicions. During dinner one evening, she mentioned seeing Richard and that gorgeous assistant of his having lunch at an exclusive restaurant downtown. They seemed deep in conversation over property listings, she said casually, before noticing my expression and quickly changing the subject. That night, while Richard worked late, I made a decision I never thought I'd make in 35 years of marriage. I used his birthday as a password attempt on his locked personal projects folder, and it worked. Inside were drafts of divorce papers, emails with his attorney discussing strategy to minimize my settlement, and most devastating of all, photos of Richard and Veronica touring waterfront properties together. One email exchange with his attorney made me physically ill. How do we ensure Opal receives as little as possible? She has no idea about the offshore accounts or the Wyoming properties. His attorney's response: the key is to establish the separation date as early as possible. Any assets acquired after that date could be considered separate property. That night, I finalized my own strategy. I transferred funds from our joint household account to my private account, making it appear as regular bill payments. I updated my resume and submitted applications to several educational consulting firms. I researched affordable apartments near Alicia in California, as well as options closer to home. Everything was in place. I just didn't know how soon I would need to execute my plan. April 17th started like any ordinary Tuesday. I prepared breakfast as usual: scrambled eggs for Richard, coffee for Marcus, and fresh fruit for Natalie. No one noticed my hands trembling slightly as I poured the coffee. The night before, Richard had announced he would be home early for an important family discussion. Almost simultaneously, Marcus had suggested a family dinner to talk about the future of the household. The timing seemed suspicious, but I maintained a calm facade while my mind raced. As soon as everyone left for work, I called Jennifer Harlow. "Something's happening today. I can feel it." "Are all your documents secured?" Jennifer asked. "Yes, everything's ready. I just never thought it would actually come to this." "Stay calm, Opal. Remember what we discussed. Don't sign anything without me reviewing it first." I spent the morning moving my most treasured personal items, photo albums, my mother's jewelry, important mementos, to the trunk of my car. I transferred them to Sandra's house during what I told Richard was a routine grocery shopping trip. By 4 o'clock, the house was unusually full. Natalie's parents had arrived with what appeared to be enough luggage for a month-long stay, not the weekend visit Natalie had mentioned. Harold and Catherine made themselves comfortable in the living room, with Catherine immediately critiquing the placement of furniture and suggesting improvements. Marcus arrived home early, unusually tense, and avoiding eye contact with me. Natalie hovered at his side, an anticipatory gleam in her eyes that made me uneasy. "Mom, can we talk in the dining room?" Marcus finally asked after an awkward exchange of pleasantries. I nodded, following him, while noting that Natalie and her parents trailed behind us like a small procession. We sat around the dining table where we'd shared countless family meals, now feeling like strangers in a business meeting. Marcus cleared his throat. "Mom, Natalie and I have been thinking about our future, particularly now that we're planning to start a family." Natalie nodded enthusiastically. "We've been discussing it with Dad and Mom, and they agree this house would be perfect for a multi-generational family home." My stomach tightened. "What exactly are you suggesting, Marcus?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Well, with this much space, it makes sense for all of us to live here together. Natalie's parents are ready to sell their house and contribute financially to renovations here." "And where do I fit into this plan?" I asked quietly. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room before Marcus continued avoiding my gaze. "We found a lovely senior apartment complex about 20 minutes from here. 1 bedroom, but very modern and maintenance-free. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. My son was suggesting I move out of my own home to make room for his in-laws. "This is my home, Marcus," I said evenly. "Your father and I paid off the mortgage 15 years ago." Harold, Natalie's father, interjected. "We understand that, Opal, but you have to think practically. This house is far too large for just you and Richard. It makes more financial sense to downsize at your age." "My age?" I repeated, feeling a surge of indignation. "Mom," Marcus said, his tone suddenly patronizing, "it's time for you to step back and let the next generation take over. You've had your time here for over 50 years. Before I could respond, the front door opened and Richard walked in. He wasn't alone. A sleek woman in her early 30s followed him along with an older man carrying a briefcase I recognized immediately as belonging to Thomas Brennan, Richard's attorney. Richard looked momentarily surprised to see us all gathered in the dining room. "Oh, I see Marcus has already started the conversation," he said, collecting himself quickly. "What conversation exactly?" I asked, looking between my husband and son. "The one where Marcus suggests I move out, or is there more?" Richard straightened his tie, a nervous habit I recognized from 35 years of marriage. "Opal, we need to talk privately." "Anything you have to say can be said in front of family," I replied, gesturing to the gathered group. Richard's jaw tightened. "Fine. Opal, this is difficult, but our marriage isn't working anymore. I've filed for divorce." Despite my suspicions and preparations, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a physical shock through my body. My son had just suggested I leave my home, and now my husband was ending our marriage, all within the span of 10 minutes. "I'd like you to meet Veronica," Richard continued, gesturing to the woman beside him. "We've been seeing each other, and we're planning to build a life together." Veronica had the decency to look uncomfortable, but not enough to leave the room. Thomas Brennan placed his briefcase on the table and removed a stack of documents. "Mrs. Whitmore, these papers outline the proposed division of assets. Mr. Whitmore is prepared to be quite generous given the circumstances." I took the papers without looking at them. "And what circumstances would those be, Thomas?" "Well, the length of the marriage balanced against Mr. Whitmore's significantly greater financial contributions," he stammered. Marcus leaned forward. "Mom, you should consider yourself lucky. Dad's offering the condo in Lake Forest and a fair settlement. Many women your age get much less." In that moment, looking at my son advocating against my interests, something crystallized within me. The twin betrayals from the 2 men I had devoted my life to created perfect clarity. They had planned this together. Richard would divorce me, while Marcus ensured I vacated the house, making room for Richard's new life and Marcus's expanded family. "I need time to review these documents," I said calmly, surprising even myself with my composure. "Of course," Richard said, seemingly relieved at my lack of outburst. "Take all the time you need, but we'd appreciate a decision about the living arrangement soon. Veronica and I are hoping to close on our new property within the month, and Marcus would like to begin renovations here." They had already planned everything, assuming I would quietly acquiesce as I had to so many of their decisions over the years. I stood up, gathered the papers, and walked toward the stairs. "I'll be in my room. I need to make some calls." As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I heard the murmur of congratulatory voices below. Richard and Marcus no doubt congratulating each other on how smoothly their plan was proceeding. What they didn't realize was that I was about to make some calls that would change everything. From the privacy of my bedroom, I initiated the plan I had meticulously developed over the previous 2 years. My first call was to Jennifer Harlow, who answered immediately. "It's happening," I said quietly. "Both of them on the same day. Richard served divorce papers, and Marcus is trying to push me out of the house to make room for his in-laws." "Are you somewhere private?" Jennifer asked. "Yes, I'm in my bedroom, They're all downstairs, probably celebrating their successful ambush. Good. Don't sign anything. I've prepared our counterfiling based on the evidence you've provided. I can submit it first thing tomorrow morning. Do it, I authorized. And Jennifer, I want to pursue the financial concealment angle aggressively. No more Ms. Nice Guy. Understood. Now access that emergency fund we set up. You might need it sooner than we thought. My next call was to Alicia, who reacted with the outrage I had suppressed. They did what both of them on the same day. Her voice rose with each question. Mom, that's not a coincidence. They planned this together. I know, sweetheart, and I'm done being the accommodating wife and mother who puts everyone else first. What can I do? Alicia asked. I might need a place to stay temporarily. Could you come home for a few days? I'll book the next flight, and Mom, take everything that matters to you before they can stop you. After ending the call, I accessed my private email account and sent the pre-drafted message to Richard's managing partner at the law firm. Attached were copies of emails documenting Richard's misuse of client trust accounts and potential tax evasion, information I'd discovered during my clandestine investigation. The message was simple. As a concerned citizen and spouse of one of your partners, I feel obligated to bring these irregularities to your attention. An internal investigation might be warranted before these issues attract regulatory scrutiny. Next, I logged into our joint banking accounts and executed the transfers I had planned months ago. While it would have been illegal to empty the accounts entirely as a joint account holder, I had every right to transfer a reasonable portion to my individual account. I moved exactly 50% of our liquid assets, leaving detailed records of the transactions. Finally, I called Sandra. It's time. Is the apartment ready? Sandra had helped me secure a furnished one-bedroom apartment under her name 3 months earlier, anticipating this very scenario. Everything's set up, including the utilities. The keys are where we discussed. Do you need me to come get you? Not yet. I have a few more things to do here first, but I'll likely be moving in tonight. With my immediate plans secured, I changed into more practical clothing and sensible shoes, preparing for what would come next. I packed an overnight bag with essentials and placed it by the bedroom window, accessible via the side porch roof if I needed a discreet exit. Then I did something that would shock everyone waiting downstairs. I carefully reviewed the divorce papers Richard had presented, noting the lopsided distribution of assets and the complete absence of any mention of Richard's hidden accounts or properties. Armed with this knowledge and my own documentation, I descended the stairs with confidence I hadn't felt in years. The group fell silent as I entered the dining room. Richard and Marcus exchanged nervous glances, clearly expecting tears or pleas. I've reviewed your proposal, I said calmly, placing the papers on the table. I find it incomplete and unacceptable. Richard's eyebrows shot up. Opal, be reasonable. It's more than fair considering the circumstances. By circumstances, do you mean the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, or perhaps the Wyoming LLC that owns 3 rental properties? Or maybe the cash transfers to your private account that coincidentally began the same month Veronica joined your firm? The color drained from Richard's face. Marcus looked between us, confusion evident. Dad, what is she talking about? Richard's attorney interjected. Mrs. Whitmore, these accusations are both unfounded and inappropriate. I smiled for the first time that day. Actually, Thomas, they're extremely well-founded. I have copies of all the relevant documents which I've already shared with my attorney. Jennifer Harlow. Perhaps you've heard of her. At the mention of Jennifer's name, Thomas visibly flinched. Jennifer's reputation for aggressive advocacy in high-asset divorces was well known in Chicago legal circles. Additionally, I continued, I've taken the liberty of transferring 50% of our joint accounts into my personal account. Perfectly legal, as I'm sure Thomas will confirm. Richard stood abruptly. You had no right. I had every right, just as I have every right to remain in this house, which, need I remind everyone, is jointly owned by Richard and myself. Marcus attempted to regain control of the situation. Mom, be reasonable. This arrangement benefits everyone. Everyone except me, I corrected him. And I'm no longer interested in arrangements that benefit everyone except me. I turned to gather my purse and car keys. I'll be staying elsewhere tonight to give myself space to think. My attorney will be in touch with yours tomorrow, Richard. And Marcus. You might want to help your in-laws find hotel accommodations. Their extended stay won't be happening. As I walked toward the door, Richard called after me. Opal, don't do anything rash. We can negotiate. I turned one last time to face the room. For 35 years, I compromised, accommodated, and put everyone else's needs before my own. That ends today. With those words, I walked out the front door of the home I had maintained for decades, not as a defeated woman, but as someone finally claiming her power. Within hours, Richard would discover that his professional reputation was in jeopardy. Within days, he would learn that his carefully hidden assets were exposed. And within weeks, both he and Marcus would realize they had severely underestimated the woman they had taken for granted for so long. The 3 months following my dramatic exit were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional reckonings, and personal growth. I moved into the modest one-bedroom apartment Sandra had helped me secure, bringing only essential items and treasured keepsakes. The contrast between my spacious Highland Park home and this compact urban space was stark. But there was an unexpected liberation in the simplicity. Richard's professional life imploded with remarkable speed. The internal investigation at his law firm, triggered by my anonymous tip, uncovered financial improprieties beyond even what I had documented. He was placed on administrative leave pending a complete audit of his client accounts. They've frozen all the firm's partnerships distributions, Richard complained during one of our court-mandated mediation sessions. I can barely cover the mortgage and my legal expenses. How unfortunate, I replied, remembering all the times he had scrutinized my grocery receipts while secretly funneling money to his hidden accounts. Marcus attempted to contact me multiple times after that first night. His initial messages were accusatory. How could you do this to Dad, to our family? But as Richard's financial and professional situation deteriorated, his tone shifted to one of grudging reconciliation. 6 weeks after I left, Marcus finally arranged a meeting at a neutral coffee shop. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. Natalie's parents moved back home, he admitted without preamble. Once they realized Dad's assets were frozen and the house might be sold, they suddenly remembered their insurance claim was being processed faster than expected. I sipped my latte calmly. And Natalie, Marcus stared into his untouched coffee. She's been difficult. Says this isn't what she signed up for. We're in counseling. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, genuinely meaning it despite everything. He was still my son, even if his actions had wounded me deeply. I don't understand how everything fell apart so quickly, he continued. Dad always seemed so on top of everything, so successful. Now there's talk of criminal charges for the client fund misappropriations. Your father became addicted to the appearance of success, I explained. He made increasingly desperate choices to maintain that illusion. Marcus finally looked up at me. Did you know about his financial problems, about Veronica? I suspected both for nearly 2 years. That's why I was prepared when you and your father decided to ambush me with your coordinated plan. He had the decency to look ashamed. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. Dad said you'd be reasonable if we presented it as a practical financial decision. He said you'd appreciate having a simpler living situation. Did either of you consider asking what I might want? Or did you just assume the aging mother and wife would quietly step aside when told to? Marcus had no answer for that. Meanwhile, Alicia had flown in from California and stayed with me for 2 weeks, helping me establish my new life. She accompanied me to legal meetings, organized my new apartment, and provided the emotional support I desperately needed despite my outward composure. I'm so proud of you, Mom, she told me as we sorted through the personal items I'd managed to retrieve from the house. You're showing Marcus and Dad what true strength looks like. With Alicia's encouragement, I accepted a position as an educational consultant with a firm specializing in curriculum development. My online courses and certification work had paid off, allowing me to restart my career at 58. The income wasn't comparable to what I had access to during my marriage, but it provided independence and purpose I hadn't felt in decades. One rainy afternoon, I encountered Richard outside the courthouse after a particularly contentious hearing. He looked diminished, somehow, his designer suit hanging loosely on his frame, his confident posture replaced by a defensive hunch. "Opal?" he called, hurrying to catch up with me. "Can we talk without the attorneys?" I paused, considering the request. "Briefly." We took shelter under the building's portico as rain poured around us, an appropriate metaphor for the storm that had become our lives. "I never meant for things to end this way." Richard began, running a hand through his now noticeably grayer hair. "The situation with Veronica. It just happened." "Affairs don't just happen, Richard. Neither does financial fraud. They require thousands of deliberate decisions." He winced at my directness. "You're right. I made choices. Terrible choices. And now I'm losing everything." "You chose to risk everything," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Veronica left," he admitted, staring at the rain. "Once the money and status were in jeopardy, she decided our relationship wasn't viable after all." I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, but also a strange pang of sympathy for the man who had shared my life for 35 years. "I'm sorry it worked out that way." "Marcus told me about your new job," Richard said, changing the subject. "You always were smarter than I gave you credit for." "Yes, I was," I agreed simply. He hesitated before continuing. "The thing is, I need to sell the house. The legal fees the firm withholding my partnership draw. I can't afford to maintain it anymore." "That's between you and your attorney, Richard. I know you have the right to half its value," he acknowledged. "I just wanted you to hear it from me first." As I prepared to leave, Richard asked the question I could see had been weighing on him. "Did you plan all this? The timing of your discovery? The evidence gathering, the counterfiling?" I looked directly into the eyes of the man I had once loved beyond reason. "I planned to protect myself when the betrayal I sensed finally materialized. I just didn't expect my own son to be part of it." Richard flinched. "That was my idea," he admitted. "Marcus was worried about disappointing you, but I convinced him it was the perfect solution. One clean break for you, instead of two separate ones." The confirmation of their conspiracy should have hurt, but instead, it provided a strange closure. "Goodbye, Richard. We'll continue this through our attorneys." As I walked away through the rain, I realized I was finally emerging from the shadow of a marriage that had slowly diminished me year by year. When Marcus called to tell me he wanted to meet again, I suggested a different approach. "Let's have dinner. Bring Natalie. It's time we had an honest conversation about everything that's happened." The dinner was initially tense, with Natalie barely making eye contact. But as the evening progressed, real communication began to emerge through the awkwardness. "I never wanted to hurt you," Marcus finally said. "I got caught between Dad's plan and Natalie's family expectations. I made the wrong choice, and I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. We agreed to continue rebuilding our relationship through regular meetings with clear boundaries and expectations on both sides. As the legal proceedings neared resolution, I received the news that the court had recognized Richard's attempts to hide assets. The final settlement awarded me 60% of our marital assets, including retirement accounts Richard thought I knew nothing about. When the Highland Park house sold, my share of the proceeds allowed me to purchase a charming townhouse near Lake Michigan, close enough to visit Alicia regularly, but maintaining my newly established independence. For the first time in decades, my life was truly my own, to shape according to my own desires and needs. The betrayal that had seemed like an ending had actually become an unexpected beginning. 1 year after the day that changed everything, I celebrated my 60th birthday in my lakefront townhouse, surrounded by people who genuinely valued me. Alicia had flown in from California with her new boyfriend James, a kind-hearted museum curator who looked at her with obvious adoration. Sandra and other friends I'd reconnected with or made during my year of reinvention filled the sunny living room with laughter and genuine warmth. Even Marcus was there, though Natalie had chosen not to attend. Our relationship remained a work in progress, but we had established a new foundation based on mutual respect rather than obligation. He had finally begun to see me as a whole person, with dreams and capabilities of my own, not just as mom, a role to be taken for granted. "You look amazing, Mom," Marcus said as he helped me arrange a tray of appetizers. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happier," I acknowledged, though I wish it hadn't taken such dramatic circumstances to get here. The past year had been transformative in ways I never could have imagined. My position as an educational consultant had evolved into a specialization helping women like myself, those returning to the workforce after decades of homemaking. I found profound satisfaction in helping these women recognize their own value and rebuild their professional identities. My townhouse, while smaller than the Highland Park Colonial, reflected my personal taste in ways the family home never had. Bright, contemporary furniture, mixed with carefully chosen antiques. Large windows overlooked Lake Michigan, providing the tranquility I had always craved. Richard's situation had continued to deteriorate after our divorce was finalized. The law firm's investigation had led to his disbarment, and he was now facing criminal charges for misappropriation of client funds. According to Marcus, he had moved to a small apartment and was working as a paralegal while awaiting trial. Natalie had ultimately left Marcus when his financial prospects dimmed, confirming my early suspicions about her priorities. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, leaving Marcus humbled, but also more authentic than I had seen him since childhood. As I looked around at the gathered guests, I realized how much my social circle had changed. Gone were Richard's colleagues and their status-conscious wives. In their place were genuine friends who valued me for myself, not as an accessory to a successful man. Alicia raised her glass for a toast. "To my amazing mother who taught me this year that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and create the life you deserve." The glasses clinked as everyone echoed the sentiment. Sandra added, "And to showing those men that underestimating Opal was the biggest mistake of their lives." Laughter rippled through the room, including my own. The ability to laugh about experiences that had once caused such pain was perhaps the greatest sign of healing. Later, as the party wound down, Marcus helped me carry dishes to the kitchen. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said carefully, placing wine glasses in the sink. "I found some of Dad's old financial documents while clearing out some storage. There were projections dating back 15 years showing he was spending beyond his means even then." I nodded, unsurprised. The signs were there if I had wanted to see them. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "there were also records of him borrowing against your retirement funds without your knowledge. He was living on borrowed time financially for years before everything fell apart." This information might once have devastated me. Now it merely confirmed what I already knew, that Richard's betrayal had been building for far longer than I had realized. "Thank you for telling me," I said simply. "I've learned a lot from watching you this year, Mom," Marcus admitted, "about dignity and resilience, about starting over." After the last guest departed, I sat on my balcony overlooking the lake, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The double betrayal that had initially felt like the end of my world had instead become the catalyst for a more authentic life. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing Richard and Marcus's actions, but about freeing myself from the weight of anger and resentment. I had forgiven them not to ease their consciences, but to liberate my own spirit for this new chapter. Most importantly, I had discovered that even at 58, it wasn't too late to reinvent myself. The skills I had developed as a wife and mother, organization, empathy, patience, and adaptability, had transferred beautifully to my new career and independent life. As the sunset painted Lake Michigan in shades of gold and pink, I raised my wine glass in a private toast to myself and to all women who find themselves starting over later in life. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals open doors to our most authentic selves. Have you ever had to start over after a personal betrayal? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments below. And if my journey has inspired you in any way, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and renewal. Don't forget to share with anyone who might need encouragement during their own life transitions. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that it's never too late to create the life you truly deserve.